All right, welcome back to the Tank Me Later podcast. My name is Noah Rubin, and this is episode 10. We're going to talk about the Celtics, we're going to talk about the Heat, and we're going to talk about the NBA championship winning Denver Nuggets finally getting through, going through every single team. This is episode 10. We've gone through 30 teams after this episode, which means we're almost to the draft. It's almost time to break down that. But for this episode, I was able to bring in Dan Titus of Yahoo fantasy bet and betting analyst. I don't know if that's a or the analyst there. Uh, but Dan, how are you doing today?
Doing great, Noah. Thanks for having me on, man. And I've been following your work at NBC Sports Edge. Obviously, I love everyone that works there between Raphael Johnson and Zach Hanshu. So awesome to talk to you about everything that happened postseason and then also get into a few teams and talk about some news that just dropped too. So thanks for having me on, man.
Absolutely, man. Looking forward to talking about this. And like you mentioned, the news, we're going to start with Bradley Beal. We can call it news. We can call it non-news. Right?
Kind of
Woj and
news.
Shams. Right. Yeah. I mean, they're saying, if they decide to trade him, that they'll probably talk with him about being traded. Like that's basically what they tweeted. They said, if we decide to rebuild, which I'm not a Wizards fan, I've been begging for them to blow it up and
They
decide to try
refuse
and
because
start over.
Bradley Beal just keeps on re-signing these
I
max
know.
deals. He's like, I'm
Exactly.
gonna keep you guys in purgatory for as long as possible. I'm gonna bleed you dry of all your cap space, and then you can figure out what to do. Oh wait, you can't figure it out because I hold all the cards.
Maybe
Oh
that's why they're
man,
going public with this. They're trying to get
right.
media on their side so that Bradley Beal's like, wait, maybe actually I can get traded and things will be better than getting paid money to lose basketball games. But we've seen the Heat is probably the number one team that could really trade for him. I mean, they have assets with Tyler Hero has a big contract, Duncan
Yeah.
Robinson has a big contract, Kyle Lowry has one more year on his contract, and it's big. And since we're going to get to talk about the Heat a little bit later, it's kind of great that we're starting with this.
Yeah.
Do you think there's also reports that they're going to go star hunting this offseason? I think everybody immediately thought Damian Lillard. Bradley
Mm-hmm.
Beal's obviously another option. Do you think, we'll just throw out this hypothetical, if they're able to swing that trade, get Bradley Beal, and give up Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, and Kyle Lowry, does that make the Heat, would they have been more competitive in this past NBA Finals if they had that trade? I know they didn't have Tyler Hero for that series,
Sure.
but would having the starting lineup of probably Gabe Vincent, Bradley Beal, Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, and I guess Caleb Martin or Max Strus, does that give them 6 games over Denver? I don't know that that actually has too much of an impact.
So it's hard because Bradley Beal hasn't played meaningful basketball. Like we haven't seen him in the postseason in quite some time, and I would think that his talent level would elevate this team, especially offensively. As the NBA Finals wore on, I think that the Miami Heat offense just kind of sputtered. I think a lot of people were waiting for them to sputter in the previous rounds. You went through the Bucks, you went through the Knicks, you went through the Celtics, and that their 3 point eventually regressed, right? And I think if you have a player like Bradley Beal in there, there's not as much emphasis on Jimmy Butler to go get you that bucket or to generate offense. Because I think that was the problem. Not a lot of shot creators. Bam Adebayo was outstanding in the NBA Finals, but he had a tall task on both sides of the ball, and I thought he did really well, at least trying to go neck and neck with Jokic. But outside of Jimmy Butler, if he's not scoring, where are you getting it from? Max Strus, Duncan Robinson. It seemed like each one of those guys kind of played their role at different aspects of the postseason. Whereas I feel like if you have a guy like Bradley Beal, who's a max contract player, former All-Star, I feel like he's going to make your team better. And Kyle Lowry, regular season, that's not really what you're invested in Kyle Lowry for. Like he's a postseason player. From a fantasy perspective, that's not a guy you're going to want to rely on year after year. And Duncan Robinson was a guy that wasn't even in the rotation. So if I'm having to expend him and Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson, who's making $18 million, I do it. Like, they're going to have to make a decision because Gabe Vincent's about to get rumored to be $15 million. Caleb Martin's going to probably get a pretty hefty bag himself in time. So, yeah, I think you got to make a move if this becomes available. I don't know that they have the assets to get Dame, but I think Bradley Beal sounds like a player that might be a good fit.
And they might as well throw whatever draft picks they have left because they don't draft well. They just sign guys after they go undrafted and then they turn
Look at
into
the window
stars.
now. Exactly. Like you went to the NBA Finals twice in the last 3 years. Jimmy Butler's getting up there in age, though he's continuing to get better. This is a veteran team now, so you got to go get veteran players. It's kind of like the Lakers. Like you're not looking to restart this whole thing with younger assets, so you might as well utilize those assets. Get yourself a veteran player that can help you win now.
And as much as they may like Tyler Hero, like you said, it's a win now team. Bradley
Yeah,
Beal fits much better with their timeline. So
totally agree.
I guess we'll see if
We'll
that ends up
see.
happening, or if it's that Bradley Beal says, no, I'm comfortable being a borderline all-star and getting paid a lot of money with no pressure. We'll see.
Yeah. I
I
mean, it
wouldn't
seems
blame
like him
him.
and Dame Lillard have been kind of the same guy, like refusing to, opt out of a trade or request a trade publicly. Just getting the bag and kind of waiting. Like, let me get a couple players to get here. We'll kind of be middle of the road, middle of the pack. And then you'll come into the next season, ask me the same question again. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Hopefully things change. There's a couple of players that are on the market right now that have constantly been talked about in trade talks and rumors that just never end up leaving. John Collins is another one of those guys. So really excited to see what this offseason brings, but not surprising that we have this action and this news and commentary coming out only a couple of days after the NBA Finals. We got to keep the news train going.
Yeah, and a couple days before the draft. So that's kind of what we had to fill in this next week and a half space with is these possible trade rumors that probably aren't going to
Yeah,
happen, but they might because draft night could be big. But before we
it could.
get back into more NBA stuff, I know we'll circle back with talk about the Heat as well as Boston and Denver. Before that, Dan, kind of want to hear your background with getting into, I guess, just being a general sports fan, and then kind of how you got into the industry a little bit. But I guess what was sports like? Like, what were you just a basketball guy? Did you like other things growing up? Like, what were your teams as well?
Yeah, so I'm a Philly guy, born and raised. I live out in the Bay Area now. Previous job took me out here, and I met my wife, and now I have a family. So I don't think I can go back, man. I just appreciate no snow so much more now. Um, but yeah, so I kind of got my start in the industry. Well, I should say, let me take it back further. I grew up playing basketball, baseball, and football. Played high school basketball and football. I would like to say I was talented enough to play at least D3, but wasn't in the cards. I chose to go to Virginia Tech, get a business degree because I realized at 5'9", I probably didn't have a future in professional sports. And so had to get a degree. And upon graduation, I was in a recession, so I had to get a job. I wound up getting a job at Lockheed Martin and did that for 11 years and really enjoyed it. Kind of, but always in the back of my mind, I'm like, this isn't me. I think I want to work in sports. And going out of college, I never knew that there was actually an industry that you could have a career path in terms of fantasy or sports betting or anything like that. And so once I started to notice trends, kind of evolving in the industry in terms of the adoption of sports betting across different states, and just seeming like the expansion of DFS and how much it's being marketed in terms of the natural live game experience, I was like, maybe there is a route that I can kind of figure out to get in here. And so I was always passionate about basketball. I've been playing fantasy basketball since 2001. I'm 37 years old now, so I've been playing for over 2 decades. Always been obsessed with it. And I was like, all right, well, how can I do this? So randomly, a friend of mine, Adam Koffler, and I, we both worked at Lockheed Martin together. We wound up going to the FSGA conference, and we learned it's like, oh, there actually is an opportunity to kind of get in this, but how do we do it? So I volunteered, put in an application to write for Fantasy Pros, and ironically, Zach Hanshu was my NBA editor, which was pretty cool. So he got to see the horrible writer that I was initially to where I got now. And it was just a really good experience. But unfortunately, when I decided to quit my job, the pandemic happened literally 3 months after that. So as much as I was excited to like jump in, I'm like, all right, I'm a writer. I'm not making any money, but you know what? I'm going for my dream. Sports stopped. And I was like, shit, what am I going to do now? And so like I actually used it as an opportunity to just do off-season like while the hiatus was going on, I was just doing all the updates on what was going on around the NBA. And I kind of got more momentum there and decided, I was like, you know what? There's a lot of other opportunities to create content. So I started doing video stuff. I started doing production and just started to try to learn as much as I could in such a short amount of time so that when sports restarted, I could really hit the ground running. And that's what I did. And so I started my own podcast with Zach and Adam Koffler and also Alex Burns. Shout out to him on Rotoballer. It was called the Stretch 4 Podcast. We parlayed our relationship in the Fantasy Pros into working with another company called Blue Wire, and then we eventually end up on the Action Network. And then I don't know how the heck it happened, but an opportunity came up to me that was presented to me to be a fantasy basketball analyst full time. I didn't know that they had those, that was even available. So just extremely fortunate that I was in the right place at the right time. And obviously I'm passionate about fantasy basketball more than anything, and basketball more than anything. So I couldn't be happier and just extremely blessed to be in the position that I'm in. Get to talk to great guys like you, and talk hoops nonstop. So yeah, as we were talking about before we got on, it's like, the NBA Finals is over. I would assume that I would get a break, but like there's no breaks in sports. So we'll talk about it a little bit later about it. Anyone that's has any questions about getting into the industry, but just know that it's a grind, and it's a never-ending grind. But it's certainly rewarding when you get a chance to talk about your passion and your interest all the time.
Yeah, you said we were talking about it before. I was mentioning this specifically. The NBA Finals ended 2 nights ago, and I believe it'll be 10 days after that Game 5 ended that the draft will be right there. And I think if it would have gone to a Game 7, it would have been
that would have
either
been
the 18th or 19th.
Tight
and then the draft on the 22nd. So,
but then you also have players that are like needing to, opt into their player options between now and June 29th. So like, dude, like these Woj bombs are about to start just flying.
Yeah. And then after that, it's free agency, I think, opens on the 30th or the night of the 30th going into July 1st. And then you have Summer League.
Right after that.
Mm-hmm. I guess the break is kind of mid-August until preseason starts. I guess there's like a month and a half where it's like pretty slow. But yeah, I mean, it's basically nonstop. I was mentioning this. It's the Super Bowl is in February, and then the draft is late April. So you have about 2.5 months as opposed to 8 days with the NBA. So sports in general don't stop, but specifically with basketball, it's kind of crazy how year-round of a sport it is.
And I think that that's what separates basketball analysts from football or any other sport. I would argue baseball is pretty much a grind too, but they do have more of a hiatus in the offseason than basketball does. But basketball is you are a degenerate if you love basketball, especially fantasy basketball. 82 games plus, going into the this is a dynasty podcast, so you're constantly evaluating younger talent, the movements, the injuries, the load management, like so many variables that make it super interesting. And like, that's what always like drew me to it, was just the amount of dedication that's required to like be good at this.
Yeah. I have issues getting some of my friends to either join leagues or stay in leagues. Cause it's like, if they tell me, yeah, sorry, I don't really want to set a lineup every single day for 6 months. I'm like, that's fair. I can't get mad at you. I mean, I know it's a lot to keep up with. So sure, no problem. I'll find somebody else to take your team. I get it. But yeah, it's definitely a nonstop grind. Actually, something you said on Adam King's, like, I think it's Balls Deep podcast, where we're going through analyst by analyst with background stuff. You were the first person that I heard talk about the community within the fantasy basketball space that's just so different from, I guess, the fantasy football space. Like, can you tell me a little bit about what your experience has been like? Because I know for me, everybody I talked to has been incredibly nice, helpful, or Adam was one of the first ones. I think I posted a different podcast I was doing, just posted an episode, had Zach on it. Adam pretty much immediately DM'd me and said, hey, if you ever need a guest, like, I'll hop on. I'm like, I don't even know who you are, but sure. It was great, incredibly nice. And now I've had him on a few times. But what's your experience kind of been like with the fantasy basketball industry?
Yeah, it's been outstanding. And, I think even from my first early days doing Fantasy Pros and reaching out to folks to try to hop on as guests for podcasts, I think everyone's just been very open and welcome, as you said. Like, everyone's willing to jump in. I think our group threads that we have on Twitter are very engaging. I just feel like there isn't that much BS with it. Like, I feel like we all have a common goal of wanting to inform fantasy players on how to get better, give them the right information to make informed decisions. And there's no drama in between, right? Like, there's no hidden agendas that I've seen or sensed out. Whereas, if you go on fantasy football Twitter, man, it's gross, dude. It's just people belittling each other and like getting in their feelings, trying to one up each other, try to jump on the first news that happens and beat everybody else, acting like they're, Adam Schefter in their own right. Like, it's kind of sad, to be honest with you, because like most of these people are grown men and or women, excuse me, grown men and women. Don't really see women that much doing that. It's more of the men that are kind of catty about it. But yeah, it's just I appreciate the fact that our community is very uplifting and always wanted to help out one another and also share information. Like I've learned so much from other folks like, Josh Lloyd's been a guy that I've looked up to a long time in this industry because he does his own projections. He has his own website. Like everyone is the entrepreneurial mindset of everyone in fantasy basketball seems to be way higher. Like people are like, hey, if I can't work for my own outfit for this outfit, I'll start my own. I don't have a podcast, I'll create one. Hey, let's get everybody on here so we can continue to share the resources that we have. And I think that's just something that I really value in this and being a part of the fantasy basketball community.
Definitely, as opposed to anybody that has a take getting a quote tweet with somebody trying to dunk on them and just make them look foolish because I don't know. I know I've had bad tweets. I'm sure everybody has. So when that happens, it's like I'd rather have somebody like share their opinion in a respectful way as opposed
man, we have healthy debates and it's not like it's never an attacking or kind of a belittling or condescending way. It's almost like, hey, let's have a conversation, which I think that's when Twitter is good, right? Or at its best is when you're having helpful debate. But when you get into the slander and all that, that's just like y'all are doing too much. And I feel like I never have to deal with that with basketball. So I guess let's keep it that way. Let's keep that the positive energy and affirmations going. But yeah, man, I think this is just a great spot to be at, and to be able to talk hoops in a free flowing manner is just so great.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll start talking some of those hoops. So we'll talk about, like I said, Celtics, Heat, and Nuggets. We'll start with Boston. Let's see, pull up their exact record. They finished 57-25, second best record in the East, second best record in the league. They don't have their own first. The Pacers will make that pick because of the Malcolm Brogdon trade, which I don't care that, like, regardless of where they picked, that was insane that they were able to give up a first and like 4 guys that were out of their rotation for a guy like Malcolm Brogdon, who has played as like a borderline all-star in the past, and they have him for their 6th man. Boston had one of the deepest teams in the league coming in, especially maybe this was more of an underrated signing, but adding Danilo Gallinari, and then he tore his ACL, so they weren't even going to have they didn't have him. And there was times, I'm a Hawks fan, so there was times he was carrying our offense for games at a time, not like a long stretch, but there was times.
To be honest, he would have been a really good fit for the Heat series because having to stagger Robert Williams and Al Horford, who Al Horford was struggling to get out there in the perimeter to stop the 3-point barrage. And Robert Williams doesn't play, any more than 20 minutes. Imagine if you get Danilo there, a guy that can play multiple positions, but also can shoot better than both of those guys too. So yeah, I think that was a loss that was an unintended, unexpected factor that they couldn't go to in an adjustment period for the end of the season. So we'll see if he comes back. He's definitely getting up there in age now, but certainly can at least give you a little scoring punch there.
Yeah, I don't know how relevant he'll be in fantasy, but I think having him as a shooter is a great element, especially with how much Boston likes to just chuck threes for their offense. I mean, there was times for me where I watch the games and it's like, all right, they need a bucket here. Cool. Like what play is Joe Mazzulla going to draw up? Oh, it's another
ISO
three. Another one
contested fadeaway.
It's the lack of, I don't know, structure in their offense is like, it must be fun to play for the Celtics because you just shoot contest. Maybe it's just Tatum and occasionally everybody else gets to do it, but mostly Tatum gets to just do it when he wants. It looks like a fun offense to play in.
Yeah, I feel like they're going to – I'm trying to give Joe Mazzulla some slack here because he wasn't expected to be the head coach in the beginning of the season. And all things considered, he had a great year. They're second in the Eastern Conference, as you mentioned. They got – they were just on the cusp of making it to the finals yet again. They took it to Game 7. I feel like he'll have a better system in place to utilize the assets that he has. Now, granted, he did have 82 games to figure out something, but I think there's always been that difference between regular season basketball and playoff basketball. And I think he just got out-coached a little bit because he didn't have the experience. But now that he has that under his belt, I think he'll be better prepared. But I think it is something worth bringing up, though, because the offense seems to get a bit stagnant too much, right? And Caleb Martin called out Jaylen Brown and his lack of handle. It's like, hey, we're forcing this guy to go left. We're forcing him to go left. but I do think that there's definitely flaws in their games that were exploited that they're going to need to improve upon going into the next year. But like, I don't see they're going to run it back. Like their squad is too deep. They have everybody pretty much under contract. They're going to have a problem in 24-25 though, because they're not going to be able to afford Brown and Jason Tatum with super maxes. So from a dynasty perspective, like I'd actually feel great about Jason Tatum. Hashtag basketball has him ranked number 3 overall. I think that that's accurate because he's not going anywhere. Jaylen Brown is at 40, which is actually, I feel like that's actually kind of low considering where he could be in another situation where he'll probably be an alpha. But I think that, going into next season, this team's going to be solid. I think that they overachieved considering that they had a new head coach. He's going to get his own staff around him, surround him, making those decisions, those adjustments that he couldn't make this year. Fantasy perspective, I think this team's going to be solid. So I do have my doubts about Robert Williams. I think finally, like I know he is a darling just for what he can do defensively, but the health concerns are really starting to add up now. So I don't know that you can trust him. Seeing him ranked at like 74th, I feel like that's fair given that you can't rely on him for a full season. I think there could be an opportunity for Marcus Smart to go up a little bit. He's at 108. I feel like he's a top 100 player, but the fact that he's getting his minutes eaten into by Derek White and Malcolm Brogdon, the combination of both of them, certainly does kind of hamper his fantasy expectations.
Yeah, I think Marcus Smart is a really interesting situation because I was looking at all the Celtics stuff the other day, and he just I think he finished outside the top 100 by 9 cap value for the first time in, years. But he averaged a career high in assists. Like his numbers weren't down that much. I think one of the issues that I see with Boston is I think he's a really good player. Like he can run point guard, but I don't think he's necessarily like on that same level. Yeah, like a true leader that they probably need to run the offense. Like he can basically run the defense like with his effort as well as just playing good defense. But offensively, I feel like if they had more of like a true point guard to kind of rein in Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, utilize them. I feel like especially with Joe Mazzulla in his first year, you're not going to really outcoach Eric Spoelstra with a first-year head coach. I think that's something they can probably have expected going into that series. But I think it's things that they can work out. Like you said, they have way too much talent to not run it back. Anybody can make fun of Jaylen Brown for having 8 turnovers in Game 7.
Right,
of course. Right. Like everybody can. But when you look at this team from top to bottom, they were far more talented than Miami. They should have won that
on
series.
On paper, for sure.
Exactly. So I think that there's no reason for them to not just continue to run it back with the team that they have. And as we saw, I think this season, Jaylen Brown finished 49th. Jason Tatum was 11th in 9 cat scoring. Nobody else was top 50. Quite a few top 100 guys. So they have a lot of guys that can be really good in fantasy, but I feel like everybody's going to be slightly limited by the fact that Jason Tatum's going to have the ball and get to shoot whenever he wants.
Yeah.
And when he's not shooting, Jaylen Brown gets to shoot every single time. So guys like Derek White, Malcolm Brogdon, who are very capable of being really good fantasy players, just get capped a little bit by a lack of offensive opportunity at times.
Yeah, I feel like the Boston Celtics, from a fantasy perspective, I think Jason Tatum is a person that I'm going to be aggressively targeting in redraft leagues. I think he's a top 5 pick this going into next season. I could argue top 3, mainly because if you look at his numbers, he's improved in points, rebounds, and assists every single year. The only thing that he's still kind of struggles with sometimes is his shooting efficiency. If he can get up to 48, 49%, you're looking at a very good fantasy player. Jaylen Brown is one of those guys that I think you'll consistently see go in the 4th, 5th rounds. Maybe he can get. I don't see 3rd round value with him, because he has a lot of turnovers, bit inconsistent sometimes, but he's still pretty young, so I could see him also getting better. The other guys, though, I feel like the Marcus Smart, Derek White, Malcolm Brogdon are all going to be like mid to late round guys, and the thing about Derek White that I like the most is that he at least is a very good shot blocker. So if you're looking for a guy that can provide value outside of just their normal, outside points, rebounds, and assists, like Derek White is an invaluable fantasy player because of that. I think he was second most blocks by a guard in the league, only to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, which, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, there's like nothing that he does wrong in fantasy. But I think that those blocks are very underrated. And he gets you steals too. He hits threes. He's good from the free throw line. I think he out of Marcus Smart, Derek White, and Malcolm Brogdon, I'd probably rank Derek White the highest just because he has that defensive upside that you don't typically get from guards.
Yeah, I agree. And he is one of those guys where I know I mentioned the lack of offensive opportunity at times, but he's good with a handful of catch and shoot threes. And
exactly.
We see him make hustle plays. We saw him win a game with a hustle play, extend the series with a hustle play. So I don't think anybody outside of Brown and Tatum are high volume offensive guys, but I think that, just to not totally backtrack on my point, that it kind of takes away a little bit and limits when you have, they have probably 8 or 9 guys that are legit, probably starting caliber players.
Definitely. Or start at some point. Yeah.
Exactly. They had Malcolm Brogdon as a permanent sixth man, basically, but Marcus Smart and Derek White are both starting caliber players. Horford and Robert Williams, obviously, both the Jays. Grant Williams has had stretches where he plays like a starter, but I think when you have so much depth like they have, that it's hard for him to even get the opportunity to really shine other than an occasional catch and shoot three and playing good defense. He's a guy that I find interesting. He hasn't really done much for fantasy yet, and he's a restricted free agent this summer. I want to say he turned down a 4-year, $50 million offer. I don't remember exactly when that was, but I know he turned that down. If he gets offered more than that, does Boston match that? Do they just let him walk?
So. I think they're going to let him walk. I think that they're looking ahead. Like, their cap situation is not good going into 24-25. So yeah, I'm expecting him to move on. I was just going to ask you, who do you think benefits if Grant Williams leaves? Where does that opportunity kind of present itself for which player?
Probably the guy that we talked about earlier, and Danilo Gallinari. I don't think anybody else really comes in and just fills those minutes that is also going to make an actual impact. I don't know if Gallo's a guy that's going to be even ready for the start of the season. When I was looking it up earlier, or maybe a few days ago, his knee wasn't at 100%, or maybe I'm just totally making this up, but I don't know that he's going to be able to play 20, 25 minutes off the bench at the start of the season. Right. But I think he's probably a guy that could see 10 to 15 minutes here and there off the bench, hit some threes, which is what Grant Williams was doing. He's not the same level of defender, but they probably just rely on Al Horford playing more power forward when Jason Tatum isn't on the floor in kind of that backup role. Or maybe they're able to sign somebody else for cheap that can just kind of be a nice role player for them. Like I was saying, they have, I guess, at least 7 or 8 guys that are legit starters if Grant Williams leaves. So if they're able to get, I don't know if they have a second round pick or not, but maybe sign somebody in free agency just to kind of fill out a few minutes here and there. I think they have enough right now on their roster that they bump up everybody's a few minutes, and they've kind of covered themselves as far as what Grant Williams was doing.
Yeah. I think that they could probably add someone in free agency, someone at the mid-level exception that's, trying to get on a roster that can potentially have an opportunity to win a championship. Saw some rumors once the Chris Paul being waived news kind of dropped, and I wouldn't be surprised, like, if he truly is available. He wasn't on the list of suitors that Woj mentioned. It was like the Lakers, the Clippers, the Warriors, and the who was the other team? Other team escapes me, but I feel like Chris Paul would be that natural point guard that would fit to kind of get them involved, but I just don't know if they're going to be able to make the money work, considering how much he's owed. And yeah, I just think that would be a tough situation, but I feel like that would be a good fit. Get a true point guard, and then you can have, you can kind of stagger the Tatums and Browns at that 3-4 spot to kind of make up for the difference if you lose Grant Williams in the process.
Yeah, and I looked it up. The Knicks are the other team. I don't know how good of a fit that really is.
Yeah, no, I don't even think that's real.
They probably just do that where it's like, okay, this guy needs a team. Let's a New York team. Okay, 2 LAs. Yeah, then we'll just. Why would, I don't know. To me, the Lakers make
the Warriors
sense,
doesn't make any sense either, because I'm like, what is he going to come off the bench behind Chris Paul, or behind Steph Curry? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And you signed Jordan Poole too, so like I don't. I don't know how that
Is
would
he
work.
going to go back to the Clippers? And they have Russell Westbrook. Like, I'm not
I think
saying
that
Russ
makes
is
a
a
lot
guy.
of sense. Yeah, me and Raph were talking about it yesterday, and
Yeah.
I feel like the Clippers probably. I mean, the injury risk is just wild there
Yeah.
if he ends up going, but like they need a point guard, and
Yeah.
him and Ty Lue, I think that would make sense. You know, Paul George, they have the ball in their hands, but I feel like Chris Paul wouldn't be asked to do much other than, hey, let's get into the offense, let's slow the pace, play good defense, something that Russ doesn't really do that much. So I think that the Clippers definitely sounds like a good fit.
I think I don't remember which beat reporter, but somebody for like a Clippers beat reporter tweeted out about how when they were interested in signing Russ, that you could hear, or I guess that he heard people in the locker room discussing about how that would be a good fit. I guess probably Paul George was a big name
Yeah.
but he said when it comes to Chris Paul, you don't hear that same chatter. So I don't know where that comes from,
Ooh.
but I think, I don't know, with what Chris
Nut
Paul has
checking too many
been.
guys.
Yeah, I mean, he's an aggravator. If you're not
Yeah.
on his team, then he has probably burned quite a few bridges with
Mm-hmm.
either his tattling or just like trying to make winning plays here and there. I'm sure. I mean, he's played on almost half the Western Conference teams. He's probably created rivalries with plenty of guys. So
Good
maybe,
point.
I don't know. That could be speculation from one source, and then I'm using it as definitive fact. So we'll see.
Time
But
will tell.
right, yeah, I could definitely see that Chris Paul fitting in well with Boston, but I think it's also they already have 3 starting caliber point guards really in Derek White, Brogdon, and Marcus Smart. Do you start Chris Paul, move Marcus Smart to the 2, and have Derek White and Brogdon off the bench? I mean, that's not bad. Don't get me wrong,
No,
but
no.
they have
That's
options.
pretty guard heavy.
Yeah, yeah, but then they also have Al Horford and Robert Williams down low, as well as Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown on the wing. So despite a lack of cap space, it's hard to find many better situations talent-wise in the
Yeah,
NBA.
agreed.
But we can talk now about the team that beat them, the team that went up 3-0 in the conference finals after losing their first play-in game, and then beating the Bucks in 5, Knicks in 6, going up 3-0 against Boston before losing 3 straight and then winning the series, get to the finals and losing in 5. The Heat will pick 18th in the draft. By the way, Boston also, they pick 35th. They have the early second from Portland, but Miami will pick 18th, and I believe that is their only pick in the draft. So they should be able to add a talent just outside the lottery if they don't use that to trade. Like we mentioned earlier, they're going to go star hunting. We'll see what exactly that means. But the Heat, I don't know. I feel like they haven't gone star hunting in the past, but despite that, they have, I think it's 4 undrafted guys who are heavy parts of the rotation throughout the playoffs. So hashtag Heat culture finds a way to get it done. But I guess, I know we briefly talked about them earlier, but we'll start with Jimmy Butler. Might as well. I believe he played 65 games this past season after playing somewhere in the 50s the 3 seasons before that. And that may take away from his value slightly, in the sense that he's not able to play as much as a lot of other guys that get drafted as early as him. But I feel like it's almost become overblown that he misses so many games. Because I mean, if you look at guys like Kawhi and Paul George, Anthony Davis, not
Steph
as much
Curry.
this Steph exactly, that over the last few seasons haven't been able to play as many games as you would like. But Jimmy Butler seems to be his name tossed out there a good bit. And he played 65 this season. I think it was 50s before that, but he's played at least 50 games in every season. And in today's NBA, I feel like that's, for an aging veteran star, that's probably enough. It's all you can ask for, really. But he's consistently been at least top 20, most of the times top 10 in per game 9 cap value. But I find him also interesting because his mentality is very different from many other stars. I think it's funny because Jokic is the same way. You saw they asked Jimmy Butler about the Hall of Fame, and he said,
I'm not
honestly, I
going.
don't really care. If I get into the
Care
Hall of
about
Fame, I'm
that.
not going to the acceptance speech. That's nuts. And then you hear Jokic say that he doesn't like his day job, basically, after winning the NBA Finals. I'm like,
I just
goodness
want to go
gracious.
home, man. I ain't
Yeah,
here for all this. Like parade,
yeah.
what? I'm going home, bro. I got horses to tend to and beer to drink.
Exactly. And the videos of him just like unexcitedly spraying champagne in the locker room. I mean, after the
It's
game,
like, all
he's like,
right, I'm back.
all right, guys, cool. And then after the game, maybe I'm just not remembering this correctly. I don't remember anybody winning the championship and then going in like dabbing up the other team before celebrating. I don't remember ever seeing that. Maybe I'm just not remembering, which I think speaks a little bit to his character, but also just you didn't see him freaking. I mean, you saw Jamal Murray crying. You didn't see that
Yeah.
from Jokic. So, I mean, we'll get into them in a little bit, but all that to be said about Jimmy Butler, he's, I believe, going to be 34 next season. He's already said he's not going to suit up for another team. Like when he's done playing for the Heat, he's done playing in the NBA. How do we kind of value him going forward? I mean, he's consistently top tier fantasy value. His games are not great, but not horrible. Like, is he still? I mean, in redraft leagues, I guess we'll talk about that. Is he still a guy you're taking in the second round, or do you take him later than that?
So I agree with you in terms of I think I think he's been underdrafted for too long now, and going into fantasy, I'm going with the expectation that my star players. So if I'm picking in the first 3 rounds, I'm expecting to play at least 60 games. That's now like the threshold for a superstar. If you look, I mean, unless they're like 23 or 24 years old, like Jason Tatum, they're probably not going to play 60 games, over 60 games. So if you look at Jimmy Butler in a 60 game sample size, he's one of the best fantasy players there is. He shoots well from the field. He's among the league leaders in steals. He gets to the line a lot, and with that volume, you'll take that percentage any day. The only thing he doesn't really do a lot is shoot threes, but with the overwhelming expectation that he's going to deliver efficiency, scoring, and hit every other category, he's a late first for me. And if you compare him with a guy like, I would say, like Mikal Bridges, a guy that I know that is an Iron Man that I can rely on in the second round, I think that makes sense. Or even like a Trae Young, because I think the efficiency of Jimmy Butler can kind of hide or mask Trae Young's inefficiencies. But Trae Young plays a lot of games, so I think that's if you're going to draft Jimmy, I would just plan to have a guy that's a little bit younger that that you can get maybe 65 to 70 games out of, potentially 80. Everyone would love to get an 80 game season out of players, but it just doesn't happen in the modern game. Injuries, load management, so forth. I would probably feel safe taking Jimmy in the early second, but I could see the argument for him being a late first based off what he did last season. And we don't know what star power may join him in Miami, but I think right now he was benefiting from there not being a lot of offensive talent around him. It was him, Tyler Hero, and Bam Adebayo. Everyone else was pretty much mid all season. And given their cap situation, I don't think the situation will change too much in terms of Jimmy's role. I think he's going to be the leader of this team. I'd feel comfortable drafting him pretty high. I mean, hashtag basketball has him ranked 47. I would rank him higher than that, even despite his age this season. Like I'd probably put him in the top 25. And then if we starting to see this decline, I could see him moving back into the 40s and 50s over the next couple of years. But I still think that he's firmly in the window of his prime, and he's going to play great basketball and try to get to the championship again. So I think 47 is a bit low in terms of dynasty, and redraft, I would go as high as late first, early second round based off the production.
Yeah, and I think with dynasty rankings, they're always hard for me to even try and make. I've sat down and tried to do them a few times. I'm like, it just depends so much on team direction. Because
It does.
if you're tanking hard, Jimmy Butler means nothing to you. Like if you're not planning on winning a championship in your fantasy league within the next
Don't
3
bother.
seasons, you trade him as quickly as you can. But if you're ready to win, he basically holds redraft value. Like he's, maybe not a first round, but like slightly less just because you're probably planning to win for a few seasons and he can provide that. So it all, depends on team direction.
Sure.
But he's definitely a guy that when he's on the court, he's going to do
He
a
makes an
lot.
impact.
Exactly. And then with Bam Adebayo, the other all-star on the team, because Tyler Hero has gotten close, but he hasn't gotten there yet. And Kyle Lowry is a little bit past his days of being an all-star, but Bam I think he finished 33rd in 9-cat this season, played 76 games after being 39th and 19th the previous 2 seasons. I think he got a lot of hate during the Boston series, but like you said, he was great during the NBA Finals.
Amazing.
I don't know if it was just trying to make up for what he wasn't able to do during the Boston series, or if he just saw the hate on Twitter and decided he had to do a little bit more. It's probably more the fact that as good as Jokic is, he's not as intimidating defensively as Robert Williams and Al Horford can be combined. But where do we project Bam? He's still, I think he's about to turn 26, so just kind of entering his prime. He's good for almost a block and at least a steal per game. He averaged over 20 points per game this season. We've seen him average 10 rebounds per game. He does about everything you want in fantasy except shoot threes. And we've seen him shoot mid ranges. And I think in preseason games this past season, we saw him shooting threes. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that ever becomes part of his repertoire a little bit, but how highly do you value Bam Adebayo? I guess both in redraft and in dynasty, or how probably similar is it? I feel like it's pretty similar for me.
Yeah, I'm almost running out of second round people. Like I'm actually about to publish my first round of rankings in a couple of weeks. So I'm curious to see how this shakes out. But off the top, I feel like Bam is worthy of a mid to late second round pick. I think there is 20 and 10 upside. He was just slightly under that this year. Doesn't really block much, but the steals are huge for the position. And then also his shooting, he's well over 57%, I think, from the field, something like that, 56, 57. I think Bam actually is 54 this year, but I mean, that could be higher.
Yeah.
He's a 20 and 10 guy. So like, I value that in terms of, if you want to anchor with a big man that can give you defense, like that's what you want. But I think it's more about the dependability, right? You mentioned he played 76 games this year. He played 76 games. With other big men that have foot injuries, back injuries, just inconsistency, you don't see that with Bam. Like Bam shows up every night. He's going to give you somewhere between 18 and 12, 20 and 9. Like he just gives you what you want. So consistency matters. And I think that that's worth picking him in the first couple of rounds. Hashtag basketball has him 19th. I think that's probably a bit rich for me because once Kyle Lowry got there, his assists went down. If Kyle Lowry leaves or anyone else and Bam can get up to 4 or 5 assists a game, that's where you're unlocking like a huge fantasy player right there. But there was a dip in his assists since Kyle Lowry arrived. So that's why I've been kind of slightly underrating him. But what we saw in the NBA Finals was he was, they were playing through him, and if they continue to do that, that's scary. That's going to be a top 20 guy.
Now let me throw out this hypothetical that we discussed earlier. In let's say a Tyler Hero, Kyle Lowry, Duncan Robinson trade for Bradley Beal. You have Gabe Vincent probably at point guard. Maybe they bring in somebody else. Maybe that ends up being Chris Paul hypothetically. Bradley Beal, Jimmy Butler, Caleb Martin, Bam Adebayo. Bam, his scoring's probably dropping 17 or 18 points, but maybe he has less focus offensively and trying to be a scorer now that they have Beal and Jimmy Butler, as opposed to him kind of being the second scoring option, potentially third. So he's averaging 17, 18 points per game, maybe 10 to 11 rebounds. Maybe the blocks go back up over 1, maybe to 1.2, 1.3. Steals probably stay the same. Assists maybe back to 5 per game. Of course, totally random numbers. It could be completely off, but the addition of Bradley Beal is more so what I'm looking at. What do you think that could do for his fantasy game as he becomes more of, I guess, a third option offensively, but maybe gets to prioritize defense and playmaking a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, I would argue he's probably the third option now. With Jimmy Butler being 1, Hero 2, and Bam 3. I don't know that offensively my expectations would change much, but I do think that could unlock him to be more disruptive defensively because the defense, I almost feel like he'll have free reign to roam. Like Bradley Beal, we haven't really seen what he can do defensively, but when I've seen him get up, at the level, like he still plays competent defense. I mean, he's not an absolute ball stopper or anything like that, but like he can play a role within the system. But I think if you have Bam as the anchor, if he can get those blocks up to like 1.5, yeah, that's where we're talking. I mean, he was 1, 2, 3. He finished 5th in Defensive Player of the Year voting this past year. So he's already getting his respect to some degree amongst the league. But if you could put a couple more weapons that allows him to kind of free roam a little bit more and you can get more, that's amazing news. But I do think it would come at the detriment. If they do get Beal, he's definitely going to get less touches. But you could also argue he could get easier touches. So, if you have more talent around you, they generate more action and more attention. Maybe he's getting easier lobs by the rim or, put in better positions in the dunker spot where he can raise that field goal percentage up from 54% to, 57, 58 that I was talking about before. So I would actually feel really confident about Bam coming into this year. I think that this is the type of when I wrote an article maybe it was like a couple weeks ago about the biggest playoff risers. Caleb Martin ended up on that list. Bam Adebayo was not. But now after watching him in the finals, I think that he was one of those players that Jimmy gave him the confidence in the media saying, hey, if we win this thing, it's going to be because of this guy. That's a hell of a confidence boost. And probably the thing that he was going toe to toe with the finals MVP, like a guy was putting up 30, 20, and 10. Like I think Bam might, now that I'm actually talking myself into this, I think I might be making Bam an early second round pick, man. I don't know that the situation matters much. Like I think he might just be that dude now. Because he was. And maybe it was Jimmy Butler's ankle injury that put more pressure on him to perform. But I don't know, man. I think he passed the eye test to me. Like, this dude's for real. And, if he can get 20 and 10, if he can get 19, 10, 1.5 blocks and like 1.2 steals, that's fantasy gold for everything else that he does.
Yeah. I was trying to see if you could talk yourself into being a late first round pick, but there's probably 11 first round guys, then like 20 to 25 second round guys.
Yeah. I'm going to probably be, there's going to be guys that I'm probably going to be overly dismissive of. Like I might take Bam over let me not get too wild with my hot takes. I got to dig into it more. But I'll tell you what, Trae Young is not going to be up there for me. Like I'll probably pick Bam before I would pick Trae Young, just for how I want to build my roster. I don't love the turnovers and the inefficiency. I feel like the assists are nice, but you can get assists way late, right? So, I don't know. Oof, man, I don't know. Giannis is the other guy that I'm like, dude, I don't know how hard. Like if we're talking about head to head, like dude finished 100th. Like I can't trust you to make field goals, but you also do like win categories every game you play with like 30 and 20 upside. So it's going to be tough, man. But yeah, I can get there for the early second. I think I can get there with Bam. I can get there.
Yeah. Well, Trae Young's averaging 30 points, 10 assists, and 3 threes this year with Quinn Snyder. So just go ahead and write those numbers down.
Book it.
Yeah, it's happening. It's happening. I'm not a biased fan at all. So the only other guy that was in the top 100 for the Heat this past season was Tyler Hero, who we didn't get to see in the playoffs after he broke his hand and then Gabe Vincent passed it to him for a corner three. He still hit it, but every time I look back at the play, it's how bad did that, hitting that three must have hurt as well. But I think so. He finished 70 in the 70s, I believe 72nd, 75. And then he finished in the 80s the year before, 88th. How much upside does he have as a fantasy guy? We saw him average 20 points per game, and he hits a bunch of threes, can provide some rebounds and assist numbers. Okay. Just high percentage from the free throw line, pretty below average field goal percentage, doesn't really give you much defensively. Could we see him give some slight improvements across the board and end up being a top 50 guy at one point of his career? Or if maybe he ends up in some sort of trade, like the hypothetical Bradley Beal trade that we're basically talking into existence and it has to happen now. But if he goes and becomes, what Bradley Beal is in Washington, where he's able to shoot the ball more, maybe get up to 23 points per game, could we see Tyler Hero get into the top 50?
I don't know that I'm going to go top 50, but just looking at the numbers from last year, they're kind of the same person. And I say that because
Yeah.
25-5 is essentially what you're expecting from Bradley Beal. I mean, he's going to probably give you 23 to 25 points, but I mean, Tyler Hero, if he's in the right situation, can score 3 more points a game. So, and defensively, they both don't give you much. They're good from the free throw line. Bradley Beal is more efficient in terms of field goal percentage, but I think Tyler Hero is a top 70, top 60 guy. He finished 69 last year. But yeah, and Bradley Beal is 56, but played way less games. I feel like Tyler Hero is a mid-round pick. Like I'd feel comfortable taking him. I just don't know. I would try to get the 5 tool guys, like the people that can contribute on both ends of the court. But I can't deny 25-5. Like I'll take that production any day. But I'm not going to overrank him because of his name. But I think it also brings merit that he has a huge contract. So no matter where he plays or where he goes, he's going to get time because that's an investment that clubs have made in him. And he has the talent to do it. I just wonder what his ceiling really is, though. Like I feel like are we pretty much maxed out of what Tyler Hero can do? I think the only thing that he'll probably be able to improve upon is the points and maybe getting some more steals if he gets after it defensively a little bit more, if he's challenged to do that. But like rebounds, I'm not expecting to get up to 6 rebounds a game. Assists, he's never been a point facilitator, distributor type of, get people into the offense type of guy. So I think 5.5 is probably the max he would go in terms of assists. And that's probably asking a bit much. So still great for threes, great for free throw percentage, but 25-5, I think, is a reasonable expectation going forward for Tyler Hero.
Yeah, I think the only way that really gets much better is if he goes and plays for a really crappy team and they say, just go ahead and shoot whenever you want, please.
If he gets traded for Bradley Beal and it's him and Kyle Kuzma, cool. Like he's gonna cook. He's absolutely gonna cook. They're just gonna be chucking all game, no defense, just chucking.
And then they have to trade Porzingis at that point too. So yeah, maybe it's just Tyler Hero and Kyle Kuzma for a few seasons while they add lottery talent.
So I'll be honest, I would be more interested in that version of Tyler Hero than the Heat situation, just because he would be like the usage would be through the roof.
It would be kind of crazy if the Wizards were able to hold on to Bradley Beal a few years past him averaging 30 points per game and still get really good value for him.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that was honestly the sweet spot for them to trade him. I mean, he was averaging 30 a game, and I don't remember if they made the playoffs or lost in round one or what exactly happened those years, but he had back-to-back 30-point seasons, and they just didn't immediately trade him.
Yeah, they missed out on that window, but we'll see. I mean, I'm curious to see what they get in return here. But I feel like he's one of those guys that's just always respected in the league as like, oh, Brad's still that guy, so his trade value doesn't really go down. But I agree with you from a front office standpoint. I would have moved him after that 30-point season. But yeah, we'll see what they do. I think it's interesting that he's at least. It seems like the team is working together to find a potential trade destination, but we've heard the story before and it amounted to nothing. So yeah, maybe it's just hearsay, but I do think it would be really exciting if the Miami Heat decided like, hey, let's really go run this back, go get us another all-star that can get us a bucket. Not that Tyler Hero wouldn't been able to do that, but like I do feel like I have more confidence in a veteran like him than Tyler Hero.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, Beal I would assume, wants to win a ring. So
yeah,
I'd say he's still capable, but he's not going to give you 30 points per game during the regular season.
And he may not need that to get W's, right?
Exactly. And I'm sure the Heat have so many other rotation guys, but all former undrafted guys basically, and none of them are great for fantasy. I mean, you mentioned Caleb Martin earlier as a guy that could be a riser, but there's not a ton. There's a lot of good role players, but not a ton of fantasy upside. You have guys like, I mean, Kevin Love, Kyle Lowry. I mean, Love's past his days.
Yeah, Love's a free agent too.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. And then Kyle Lowry's just past his days of contributing in fantasy. Max Strus gives you threes, but not really anything else. Gabe Vincent could if he's the starter, but if they go back into the season with Gabe Vincent as their starting point guard, then I just have to assume that they failed to try and bring in like another star alongside their team. Like, they're being serious. And
yeah, I feel like Gabe Vincent played at a very high level in the postseason, but he's a backup point guard. And like, even if you look at his numbers, like he wasn't really a distributor. He was more of a guy that, would fade to the corner, or, if the ball rotation, like you would get on a 3-pointer, or, attack the lane a little bit. Like he's actually not as much of a point guard as he is a scorer. So yeah, I think they do need to probably bring in a true point guard if Kyle Lowry, winds up being shifted or moved or whatever. But Caleb Martin, I think, is worthy of a late round draft pick based off what I've seen. Like I thought, he was invaluable in that Boston series, average over 21 points. Easily could have been in the discussion for Eastern Conference Finals MVP. But I think now that Kevin Love is gone, that gives him more value, assuming they don't bring in anybody else to play that power forward position. Jimmy can obviously switch into that spot too, but I think his versatility is really important for the Miami Heat, and his shooting, his ability to play both ends. I think he's actually going to be a sneaky late round pick for fantasy managers. And he was pretty good this year as a waiver wire guy. He's going to play a lot of games. I think he's going to be the guy that's probably going to be the most valued. And Duncan Robinson's not going to really be drafted. Max Strus will probably be a waiver wire guy. And this is all a moot point if they decide to trade them all for Bradley Beal. But the one player that I would probably still target in fantasy, I think has value, is Caleb Martin.
Yeah, and I think it's just going to depend on your league. Is everybody seeing what he did?
Leagues. 10-team, he's not sniffing.
Well, I'm saying more like who is in your league. Are they seeing what he did in the Eastern Conference Finals and saying, yeah, top 75, absolutely. Did you? And he got Eastern Conference Finals MVP votes. Like he had them.
Yeah.
Like he almost won that over Jimmy Butler. He was excellent. And I think, he's, like you said, he should be drafted in 12-team leagues. But I think that there could be guys that just see what he did and maybe just buy the hype a little bit, say, oh, yeah. Like I just saw what he did. Like he's about to break out. I'm not. I think,
I would not about the breakout. But yeah. And I'll let somebody else pay a 7th round pick for him. I'll get him in like the 11th when he falls, or 12th or something like that.
Exactly. And then the third team, we'll talk about the NBA champion Denver Nuggets, who were the best team in the league for most of the beginning of the season, had the best record for a little bit, and then kind of cooled off a tad. And I think that's probably where Jokic lost the MVP race, was in that couple months stretch where they lost a few more games, even though he was still putting up ridiculous numbers. They don't have their pick. Charlotte will make that 27th. They have the 37th and 40th picks in the second round. I think they just made that trade with the Thunder during the finals to be able to get that pick, the 37th. Yeah. As good as Denver is and as much depth as they have, I feel like they don't have a ton of fantasy value. So you look at, obviously, Jokic, but then you have Jamal Murray, MPJ, and KCP, who are top 100, and then Bruce Brown and Aaron Gordon, who are top 125, and then nobody else really does anything for fantasy, which is okay. Like that's plenty of options. We'll start with Jokic, obviously. I guess
101.
Yeah, but my question is, how long is he 101? Like, is he? And he's been the number one guy for the past 3 seasons in 9-cat. He's 28, but I think he's the guy that, assuming he's still playing in 10 years and hasn't decided to literally ride his horse off into the sunset, he's a guy that can still be the best, or at least like a top 5, top 10 guy in fantasy. He's not losing any athleticism because he doesn't have much. Like he's not going to be 38 and you're like, oh man, like he's just not the same player he was. He's gonna be, he might, but he's going to be doing the same thing he's doing now. I mean, I don't think he's so. Even though he's 28, most of the time you'd probably look at him in Dynasty and say, okay, like even he can still be really good for a while longer, but he's not going to be what he is. Like this is his prime. But there's no reason to think that at this point he's not going to keep putting up these numbers for a really, really long time. How is he? If you had the top pick in a Dynasty startup today, would you take him first?
Yes. But my theory on Dynasty is probably different than others. I have yet to find a team between football or basketball that I've ever considered a rebuild. Like I refuse to. My goal is to always win money in the end. So like I'm going to try to compete as best I can. And even if that means being that Sixers franchise team that was like an 8 seed that would go to the first round of the playoffs, get bounced, and then you get a crappy draft pick the next year, and then you got to do it all again, only to get the same middling result. Like, I'll live with that because I had a chance to compete. And I think I could put myself in the best position to win by drafting a player like Nikola Jokic. And 28 years old, that's not old in basketball terms. He can play for easily 6 or 7 more seasons and be straight. Because as you said, I think the difference between Nikola Jokic and other big men is that he doesn't put himself in risky injury type positions, right? Because he's not flopping around like Embiid or Anthony Davis. He very rarely hits the ground. He's the one that is initiating contact, not taking it. And his lack of athleticism is actually probably a good thing for his sustainability, right? Like, he doesn't get injured that much. He's a guy, one of the rarities of fantasy basketball, that you can actually rely on to play upwards of 65 and more games each year. Like, he very seldom misses games. And as you said earlier on, like, they did kind of hit this stagnant period throughout the season. But I think that was because they were just like, hey, man, we're playing the long haul here. We know that we have a team that has an opportunity to win a championship. Like, let's make sure everyone is right. And for the most part, they were healthy throughout the postseason, right? And I think they're all just bought in. Nikola Jokic is the best player in the world. I'd be hard pressed to pass up on a 28-year-old that can give you a triple double and rely on him like to not only play but also be great. Like, he's amazing. So yeah, I stand Nikola Jokic. Like, he's the dude, man. Like,
Yeah.
Anyone that passes on him, like, whoever's getting number 2, like, you're winning. Like, you won off of that alone. Like, it's kind of like in Dynasty, I've kind of put him in the mantle of like Patrick Mahomes, right? Like, if you're starting a new Dynasty startup, like, what quarterback do you want? Like, you want Mahomes. Like, he's the guy. So yeah, Jokic 101 for me.
Yeah, it's funny. He would still be 101 for me, but you mentioned your philosophy for dynasty leagues is to not tank, and I can't think of many leagues that I've joined where I haven't pretty quickly rebuilt / tanked for like that is
you want
my
Kevin
go-to.
Durant? Here you go. Give me a first round pick for next season.
I'll draft my team and trade everybody over the age of 22.
I
and
respect
just have
it.
like 17 firsts for the next 3 years. That's what I have fun doing. I don't know, because he said my goal is to make money every time. Like, yeah, like my goal is to just try and get as many draft picks as I can and have like
I'm gonna be
like,
awesome in 5 years. See that? I just can't get there with that.
Oh,
I'm like, why don't I want to hand you guys money for 5 years? When my team is miserable, as I set my lineup, I'm trotting out like the bummiest of bums just to have the next pick. But I will say, if you get an opportunity to draft someone like Wemby, that's pretty cool. Like, I'll never sniff a Wemby in any draft because I'm like, I finished 5th or 6th out of 12 or something like that.
Yeah.
But
no, that's much better, like a much more respectable philosophy than what I try and do. I mean, I go,
dude, your team's going to be unstoppable eventually.
Exactly. But when I go 1-13, when I get that one win, oh my gosh, you're getting an earful for 2 weeks straight. Like, I'm not going to stop talking. So it's just funny that you mentioned that, because I was like, yeah, like that's not what I do. But I
feel like that's what most dynasty people don't do. And like, it's just always been an interesting discussion for me. And like, I actually want to we could probably have a whole debate on just dynasty strategies.
Yeah.
But that's always something I've always wondered about, especially when you're doing it with random folks. Like, I love, at least when if we're doing it with fantasy analysts, we know that we're dedicated, but there's a lot of startups that fold within 2 or 3 years. And it's like, people have these grand scheme plans. And it's like, oh wait, now 4 people left the league. Now the league's disbanding. And it's like, oh man, now I can't even like realize my vision or where it was going.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I don't play in a ton of leagues with random people. I have the few analyst leagues, but mostly this is with friends and people I know.
Okay, good. So you've been doing it for at least 5 years, and it's running. It's not gonna fold or anything like that. Okay, that's solid.
No. Yeah, I'm not.
I'd be more open to it if that was the situation.
Exactly. But. Yeah, I'm not. Okay, I'm not gonna say I'm like gonna go play with a bunch of random people and just assume it's gonna go 5 years and just do my 5-year rebuild and guarantee a championship after that. I'm not that bad about it, but yeah. Anyways, I get back to Denver, who won a championship after doing it the right way. Yeah, this is my Denver Nuggets model. I'll rebuild the right way, homegrown team.
Through the draft. It's worked out great.
Jamal Murray, I think he's kind of, I don't know, I feel like at times underrated, and now I feel like because of how he's performed during the playoffs a bit overrated. And I don't know. I feel like that's probably outlandish to say a few days after they won the finals. But I saw people saying, "Oh yeah, Jamal Murray is like top 5 point guard in the NBA, top 3," or maybe somebody said he was the best, and that may have just been clickbait, basically. But to say that incredibly talented player, incredibly talented point guard. I think for fantasy specifically, he was 60th this past season. He's before the injury, he was 32nd that season. So I mean, he's a guy that we saw him like get triple doubles in the finals. He can get a bunch of assists, like hit threes, score. He's one of the I feel like few guards that still has like a really good post game. Like obviously a lot of guards, it's athleticism or quickness, hitting step back threes, which he can still do those things. But I feel like I don't see many younger guards, especially, have like a really solid post game, which is something I like to watch from him. But I don't know that he is, despite his talent, ever going to be a consistent second round fantasy player or consistent third round fantasy player. Do you think that he can get back to that? Because he was 32nd during the 2020-2021 season, and then obviously missed the full season, and this past season was 60th. Where do you kind of see him consistently finishing?
I think he's going to be a third round pick this year, and I think he's going to be a top 40 player. And the reason why I'm so bullish on him is because he's now 2 years removed from that ACL tear. And what I saw across the postseason was a guy that was maturing into being a basketball player. Like, so before, I feel like he was a little bit more of a score first guard, and it was nice because you have Nikola Jokic there to kind of feed you, get you easy looks and whatever. But I think that transformation in the NBA Finals, where it was like, I'm just going to beat the crap out of you with this dribble handoff and pick and roll and you can't stop it. And if the Heat, with their dynamic defense and throwing out all these unique adjustments and stuff like that, can't stop it, who can? And right now, I think that this is the perfect model for a dynasty team. Like the Nuggets, I already bet them to win the championship next year. Like, I'm looking at the landscape, and like there's going to be so many moving parts across the Western Conference that I don't know that they're going to be able to make the adjustments to be able to stop this squad right now. Michael Porter Jr. didn't play well in the NBA Finals, and they still, put in work. And it's really because Jamal Murray was like, hey, man, I have the opportunity to be like a true point guard in this moment. He averaged over 10 assists in the freaking NBA Finals and had 4 straight games of 10 assists or more. That's the type of Jamal Murray that we haven't seen in fantasy, right? Like, he's usually around a 5 assist guy. Mm-hmm. I think there's an opportunity where, like, Jokic, hey, man, I got you, man. Let me take some of this facilitation off your hands here, let you body up and go get 27, 28. And then also get your other teammates involved, KCP, Aaron Gordon. I think right now he's ranked 56th in #basketball. I think that's fair. I'm just going to be a little bit more aggressive with him because, again, I hold more weight in playoff performance than I do the regular season. And I think after coming off a championship victory, from what I saw in terms of his shot creation, your great point by you in terms of like the way that he scores, he tries to get high percentage shots, good looks in the post, good footwork, can finish with either hand. He's just so versatile that I think he's finally come into his own. He's feeling fully healthy. I think that there's top 35, top 40 upside with a player like him. And you're really riding the coattails of Nikola Jokic, the best player in basketball. So I think it's going to be a win-win regardless. I think he's a player that I probably ranked so last year I was very high on De'Aaron Fox. I put them in the same caliber of ranking in terms of like their opportunity, what they can do, and also their upside. Like, I think Jamal Murray has now entered all-star caliber player. Like, he could be an all-star next year. He should be an all-star next year. So I'm going to draft him as such.
I think the thing for me, and like we saw in the finals what he's capable of, I just question, because I think that he is that talented of a player to do that. But I'm also like looking at why hasn't he done it in a regular season yet? And I think that's kind of what's frustrating for me, is because I don't see a reason why he can't average 7 assists per game.
Exactly
I don't see a reason why he can't. But why hasn't that happened yet? I think that's just something, because he averaged 6.2 this season. Before that, I think his career high was 4.8. So why hasn't he done that yet? I'm not saying that's a knock on him or a reason that I would avoid drafting him. I guess that I'm just a little lower on his fantasy upside because of that, because I haven't seen that. But building off of an NBA Finals win is definitely something that I think is very realistic. I saw this one on Twitter the other day. I'll ask what you think. It was like one of those, like one gotta go. It was Jamal Murray, De'Aaron Fox, Jalen Brunson, Trae Young.
Trey's
Either how would you?
gone.
Whoa, that's crazy.
Yeah, I just
That's
don't.
crazy.
I've never had Trae Young in fantasy. He never appeals to me just because of his erratic play. Like, yeah, he can give you a huge spike, and he's one of only 3 players to average 20 and 10 this past season. But I don't know why, man. There's just something about him that I'm just like, nah, I'll skip and go take
If
like
I
a.
were if I were a Sixers fan or Knicks fan, I would probably feel the same way.
It's
I get
fair.
it.
That's fair.
I
That's fair.
get
There could be
it.
some. There could be something to that. I could be burned a couple of times. I mean, the man did pretty
playing
much
with
end
three
Ben
threes is
Simmons
coming up.
and that whole era. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I get it, man. No, 30, 10, and 3 threes is coming up next season. It's gonna happen. But the other guy that was top 100, actually KCP was also top 100, but Michael Porter Jr. was healthy this season. It was really great. He finished 80th in 9-cat. 2 seasons ago, he was 27th. Obviously, the season in between, he played a grand total of 9 games, and he's had a lot of back issues early in his career. How do we project a 24, 25-year-old who has all the talent in the world, but has a bad back at his young age and seems to also have issues with the coach where he wasn't getting the minutes that he maybe should have, and then there was talks about him being benched and just kind of a inconsistent player, I guess. How do we value him moving forward?
So Porter Jr. I'm probably a little bit lower on, really, because now with so many assets around the Nuggets and this team isn't really going to be changing much. There's only one ball. The only upside I see him really improving in fantasy is if he's going to increase his assists, which is never going to happen, and his rebounds. So if he can get his rebounds to 8, I could be interested in like a 17 and 8 guy, but he doesn't really do that much defensively. Good turnover rate, very low turnover rate, but I think he's safely like a mid-round pick, round 7, 8. Like I'd be okay if he was there, but I'm not going to reach for him based off of. So the interesting part about Michael Porter Jr. though is like he's paid ridiculous right now. Carries a huge cap to sign a big deal. He's not going anywhere, and I think his role is pretty much set. But again, with so much usage going to Jokic and Murray, I don't see that much upside in terms of moving him up beyond 7th or 8th round.
Yeah, the reason it's funny. I was looking at the numbers. He averaged 1 assist per game this year, and
Yeah, he
1.1
never gets any dimes.
It's because every single time he touches this basketball, he immediately shoots every single time. Never seen a shot he doesn't like. Average 13.2 shots per game and 1 assist. It's just, but hey, when you have Jokic and Jamal Murray throwing the ball around, he's getting threes. Most of them, I think, pretty good looks. Some of them probably forced just because he can.
Yeah,
I can make sense why he shoots a lot. But pretty much the rest of the team, I mean, you have Aaron Gordon and you have KCP and Bruce Brown, who are solid fantasy guys, but I feel like lower value in Dynasty because KCP is a bit older. Aaron Gordon, I feel like, is also probably in his – no, he's actually going to only be 20. Yeah, so he's younger than I thought he was, but probably not a ton more upside, but just going to stick around where he is for a little bit unless he just decides to hit more free throws. Mm-hmm. And then Bruce Brown – a reliable guy, kind of provides you some hustle stats, plays a lot of games, but there's not a ton of other fantasy upside in this team unless you look a little deeper down at guys like Peyton Watson or Christian Brown. Probably have some upside just because they're a little younger. I think I saw, I don't know who blurbed it, but somebody blurbed about for us earlier that Peyton Watson may have an expanded role next season. But is there anybody, I guess, among the guys that I just mentioned that you are particularly high on or particularly low on?
I think Aaron Gordon is what he is. He had a great first 3 months of the season, and I think he kind of fell back to earth to the Aaron Gordon that we expect. He was outstanding also in the postseason, especially in the NBA Finals and the Western Conference Finals. Just an extreme adjustment by Michael Malone to get him in the dunker spot and watch him create. The assists were really great to see. The rebounds will consistently be around a 10 point, 11 point scorer. But like, I'm not going to overdraft Aaron Gordon based off what I saw in the postseason. Bruce Brown is really interesting. I love Bruce Brown. He has a player option for $6.8 million. He's probably going to decline that, but he did say that he wants to return to the Denver Nuggets. So we'll see what happens there. But I'm higher on Christian Brown than anyone, mainly because of what, not only, as a rookie, the impact that he made on the highest stage and the brightest lights. He was invaluable in that NBA Finals run. And I think if Bruce Brown leaves for the bag, Christian Brown's going to end up getting a lot more minutes than he did in the previous season. So I think that there's certainly some value in drafting him, especially late. Right now, #basketball has him number 264. You could move that way up because if he has an opportunity to get more minutes with Bruce Brown gone, like that's a huge upside. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, he's a waiver wire guy for me. Can help you in steals and threes, and that's about it. Peyton Watson, I think, might be able to get more time, but I feel like I would prioritize Christian Brown over him in terms of moving him up in dynasty rankings.
Yeah, because we saw what Christian Brown did in the finals. He got in just game 5. He played 24 minutes in game 5. Yeah, played 24 minutes off the bench. Peyton Watson, will still have to see what exactly his role could look like.
Yeah.
He has upside. I think he's somebody that you need to consider having upside, but Christian Brown is almost a pretty safe option at this point to be higher than 264. If Bruce Brown's gone, great. He's probably going to be like the 6th man or 7th man off the bench. And if Bruce Brown stays, he's still going to see a large role in year 2. I think I saw something that's interesting with him. He won like 3 straight high school titles, then went to Kansas. They won their last Big 12 tournament game before COVID. Then I think they didn't win it the next year. And then they won the national championship, and then he won the NBA finals. So
he's just a winner, man.
Yeah. Championship guy. I think the way he plays is what you would say as far as like a winner. Like, I feel like he doesn't do a ton offensively, but he's a good perimeter defender and consistently gets deflections and fast break plays. Like, he's that glue guy that you can kind of plug in and he helps you. So
it kind of reminds me of a Dante DiVincenzo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like can kind of, he's athletic, he can shoot, he's scrappy on defense. He has, winning pedigree from college.
Yeah.
He's definitely going to be a ball player. So I think that having him at 264, that's someone that you could, that's actually pretty shocking to me that Kentavious Caldwell-Pope has higher value in terms of ranking than Christian Brown right now. I think that needs to definitely be flip-flopped. So yeah, if you have him, if you're looking at these rankings and you see an opportunity to strike, definitely make the move on Christian Brown.
Yeah. So yeah, because the interesting thing about this team, you mentioned Bruce Brown, player option, could leave. Everybody else is under contract. That's part of their rotation.
They're set.
So the fact that you already put money on them to win next year, I think that's, it's hard to predict exactly, but if
Jokic gets hurt, that all goes left. But
yeah, but I think if it's one of the safer bets because they banked on their consistency and having, the same rotation, same guys built together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's like everybody else is trying to make moves. They're not going to have that same continuity and chemistry that Denver has. So there's no reason to think that they won't be at least back competing for a title, maybe not able to win back-to-back, but one of the guarantees that you're like, okay, they're going to make it at least to the second round, potentially to the conference finals, almost guaranteed. I don't see any reason why they wouldn't.
Yeah, and teams are going to be trying to make outrageous moves like trading away your depth like the Suns did for Kevin Durant to try to do these things to make it work. And ultimately, I think we saw, with the Denver Nuggets just running through them in 6 games, defense, they're going to need defense. And I don't know that there's enough defensive stoppers in the Western Conference or going to the Western Conference that's going to be able to hold back this team and this core that's had several years to get this right. And now it's all kind of clicking together.
Yeah. So you guys heard it here first. Dan said Nuggets are going back to back. Go ahead and throw all your money down.
That's not a hot take at all.
But Dan, I've already taken too much of your time, so we'll go ahead and start to wrap this up. Before we go, if there's anybody interested in getting into any sort of writing or podcasting in either just sports in general, fantasy space, kind of anything, what advice would you have for them?
I would say network. That's been extremely valuable and important to me in my growth and maturation through this industry. Making sure that even if it's just like a simple DM or asking someone for feedback, always be willing to take constructive criticism. It's only going to make you better. Try to learn as quickly as possible. Try, test, and then you're going to fail sometimes too. But just learn from your mistakes and keep it moving. Reach out to me. I can be found on Twitter at Dan Titus. DM me. My DMs are open. And we're also eventually going to be looking for some writers. So if you guys have a passion and want to write for someone like Yahoo, like I can certainly, put in some connections there or any other publication that I've worked for. If you have a passion for it, like it's a very small industry and there's not a lot of people doing it. So, if you're into this and as much of a degenerate as we are, just reach out, man. We would love to at least have the conversation. So yeah, there's no magic formula. I think it's just a combination of putting in the work, being versatile, make sure that you can write, be comfortable on video, and then also, just be willing to put yourself out there and take on assignments that may not be that advantageous in the short term, but look long term, and you could actually have some doors open for you.
Yeah, definitely a grind. Definitely not something that happens overnight. Something that you probably are gonna have to do for a while without making much money or getting much recognition.
Yeah, I was definitely broke for quite some time. That's real.
Right. But then, yeah. So, Dan, I know you mentioned earlier that you are going to have some rankings coming out in the next few weeks, but what else can we be on the lookout for to be able to check out on your content that you're posting?
Yeah, so continue to check out Round Ball Stew, our podcast on Roto World and NBC Sports Edge with Raphael Johnson. We'll be doing some draft coverage for that. As Noah just alluded to, I'll be having some rankings dropping in the next few weeks. And off-season content, man, I'll be hopefully heading to the Summer League, so hopefully I can get some footage of Wemby and Scoot and
Nice.
and the Thompson brothers. Like, I'm just really excited to be able to see that. And if you're out there, definitely holla at me. Would love to see you and talk shop. And yeah, man, just keep plugged in. I'll be having an article or two each week, just kind of recapping what we saw in the finals, the postseason, expectations to see in free agency, obviously addressing trade rumors. So it's going to be a busy offseason. So continue to tap in with me.
Absolutely. Plenty of content coming up. We just finished doing all 30 teams and recapping them, Dynasty Outlooks, which means draft content is coming up here as well. Which is probably going to be the focus of just about every fantasy publication or non-fantasy publication that's doing anything basketball for the next few weeks until free agency starts. But that's going to do it for episode 10 of the Take Me Later podcast. And Dan, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Noah. Let's do it again sometime, man. We got plenty of off-season stuff to talk about.
Definitely. Always plenty to talk about in basketball because, like we said, it never stops. So that's going to do it for this episode.